Welcome to the Museum of Aquarium and Pet History. Today is video number 4, Building 2, which is a behind-the-scenes peek of the Zoo Med building, one of our buildings. And we'll probably have this in 2 parts because this is going to have a lot of stuff in it. It's going to have dog food advertising signs, it's going to have giant neon pet signs, it's going to have Vaseline fish bowls, it's going to have the Matson Aquarium, it's going to have a Jewel Aquarium, it's going to have just an amazing amount of stuff. Okay, so sit back, grab something to drink, and let's go. Okay, so here we have the Matson Aquarium. This was made for Matson Navigation, which has basically steamships that go to Hawaii, Alaska, South Pacific, Japan, China, basically that part of the world. When Matson, Hawaii being one of the most famous routes, the Honolulu Aquarium opened up somewhere 1912, I think it was, right around there. And they had a beautiful marine fish exhibit because Hawaii is known for their marine fish. And Matson donated this tank to Steinhardt Aquarium. Actually, the larger version of this tank, there's 2 of them. There's this one, which is half size, about 300 to 400 gallons, and a bigger one that's about 900 gallons. But they donated it to the Steinhardt Aquarium, where it sat next to their alligator pool for many, many years until it leaked and was given to Murray Rakowitz. And he was actually a biologist that worked for Steinhardt. And I procured it from Murray years ago. But this particular one didn't sit at Steinhardt. This sat in Sacramento at Capitol Aquarium, owned by Grant Palsy. And I bugged him for probably 30 years to get this tank. And finally, he put it outside and it started to rust. And he said, okay, I'll sell it to you because I know you'll restore it. And it was a monumental restoration job. I mean, literally, it went to one of the most talented cast iron people I know, who had to build a frame inside of it and put reinforcements in the leg. And then we had to take the tank and take the glass out, put an acrylic tank inside of it because it wouldn't support that kind of weight. But you could see just how gorgeous the tank is. It's got Matson's emblem right here. And it's got sea turtles, it's got frogs, it's got newts, it's got rays or skates. It's got the mythological dolphin with a double tail. That's very normal for some of this old type of iron type items. It's got fish and snails along the bottom here. It's got the sea dragons or the sea devils, they call them. And then the bottom has got, the legs have got all kinds of floral design going, ending with a scallop and snail shells. So it's an amazingly spectacular aquarium that weighs a friggin' ton. We have to filter it with 2 different filters because it's pretty big in size. We have some what I thought was Liberty mollies. They turned out to be Mexican mollies that are inside. They're actually breeding in there right now. Interesting thing about Matson was he was born in 1849 in Sweden, and he was orphaned as a child. And he got a ride on a ship, got to know some influential people, was a really friendly, outgoing person. And basically this one guy that really took a liking to him got him his first ship. And the rest is history. I mean, he became a multi-million-dollar, I'm sure it's a billion-dollar company now. But it's amazing. And he came to America. And so it just goes to show that even if you're an orphan and you come to America, you can create a pretty nice little business. That's Matson Navigation. And this was one of their aquariums. The aquarium was probably made by Phoenix Foundry in Oakland, is who I think cast it. That's my guess, and I'm going to do a little more research and see if I can find that out. But so that's that. Let's go check out some of the other things, okay? Okay, so this is a Jewel Aquarium, probably the most famous Art Deco manufacturer of aquariums in the United States. This particular one is a 3rd generation. Jewel made this tank originally in 1932 at the end of the Great Depression, and he only made them special order. So he made one for his showroom, and then they only took special orders for him. So I think they sold less than 6 from what I remember. And one of his employees, who I actually talked to many years ago, had gotten the molds, and he made another, I think 6 of them as well. And the only difference is the thickness of the metal that he used, and also Jewel wouldn't let him, Hans Jensen wouldn't let him put the Jewel tag on it. So the second generation did not have the Jewel tag. This is the 3rd generation, and this was made by Sam from Play It Again Sam's, Sam Robbins. He made these in 1994 and sold them for $4,500 each. He made about 12 of them. And the difference is the height of the dolphin, the mythological dolphin. It was much higher on his than the originals. The originals came to about 13 inches and his were about 17 inches. So that's how you tell between the 1st and 2nd generation and Sam's, just for those of you that are interested in Jewel Aquariums. But this thing is gorgeous. It's got the seahorses at the bottom. It's all either cast, bronze, or brass, with cast iron as the cross beams, and it's got marble as the base here. Again, Sam's 3rd generation has a plastic frame, where the original ones from the 30s and 40s had a metal frame. And that and the dolphin height is how you tell the difference between those two. But that's a pretty spectacular aquarium. I have the 1st and 2nd generation at another location, and when we do a video on just Jewel Aquarium, I'll go over those and talk about those tanks and all the things that Hans Jensen made. This is the giant Matson Aquarium. This is the one that actually did sit at the Steinhardt Aquarium, and it again, by the Alligator Pit. It was never on the Steinhardt system, water system that they had, so they had to do all the water changes manually, which was, I'm sure, a big pain for them. And the tank also leaked quite a bit. The curator at the time said, let's scrap this thing, I'm tired of it, and gave it to Murray Rakowitz, and he took it home and kept it for a number of years until I got it from him. But you could see the Matson plate again. And there is some differences. This one's got this really cool center plate with a Moorish idol and seahorses, and again the double-tailed mythological dolphin. And it's huge. It's about between 800 and 900 gallons in size. This one does have glass, not acrylic. And the restoration we did was pretty unusual. We actually used, it had marine plywood that was worn out at the bottom. We used Corian, for the bottom and the inside sides. And I'm not sure if we sealed it with silicone or with Lexol, but we used a novel way to basically seal the inside of the tank. And it's held up for years. I mean, I've had this tank now for probably 20 years. When we open the museum to the public, which we're hoping is going to be 2027, this will be in the front, be in the very front of the museum. Okay, that's the big Matson Aquarium that was donated to the Steinhardt Aquarium. And just for fun, you could see some of the bearded dragons that we have in here that we breed. Water dragons, we're doing a really good job of breeding right now, which it took us a long time to breed water dragons. It seemed like a pretty hard species to crack the code and actually figure out how to get them to breed, but you know, they kept laying eggs in the water, which would normally kill the egg, but we did finally get some viable eggs, and we did hatch babies out of those. Some Jackson chameleons. A good friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately, was Sean McEwen, who was the curator of the Honolulu Zoo, was really into old world chameleons. I think Jackson's were his favorite. We have a basilisk. Then over here we have emerald tree skinks, which we love. They're just the coolest little lizard. I mean, you can hand feed them. They come right up to you when you open the cage up. They're just a really cool little species. These are Trophus de boisei. These are from Lake Tanganyika in Africa. And the babies are really cute. I think there's a little guy in here right there. And the babies are black with white polka dots. And normally there's lots of babies in here hiding in the caves or whatnot. But they breed all the time. Let me just show you some of the, we just hatched some beardeds out recently. And you can see some of the little different colors coming up on these bearded dragons. And these aren't that old. They're really the best pet lizard for kids starting out, because they're super tame, and with the right environment, the right lighting and heating and whatnot, they do real well. This is an albino lungfish from Africa. We got him as a baby, so I think he's about 10 years old now. And yes, he's going to need a bigger tank. And these are emperor tetras. I really love these. These came from Rosario Lacorte, who was like my childhood idol fish keeper. Anyone that could breed tetras was just amazing to me. And we had never bred tetras before, and we got these from Rosario. And he gave us the formula and did the plant thing, we did the live food thing, and these are all babies that have grown up, as you could see, all little, and there are second, third generation babies going on in there. I mean, we're not trying to breed them commercially, but just to get even a few of them is pretty amazing. And they really are gorgeous with the blue eye. When you see the adult males, they've got this just bright blue eye. They're really pretty. Two of my favorites, these are Australian lungfish. I love lungfish, I love prehistoric fish. They're named Latimeria and Smith, after Miss M. Courtney Latimer, who was the one who went to the docks and got the first coelacanth. And J.L.B. Smith was the one who identified it. So I named them both in their honor. The coelacanth is, I'm a coelacanth fanatic, which was a living dinosaur. It's a fish believed to be extinct for 35 million years until they found a live one off the coast of South Africa. And that's on my bucket list, to go down to the Comoros where they live, where the coelacanths live, and see a live one 150 feet down. And if I can't do that, then I need to go to a public aquarium that has one in formaldehyde, put a suit on with rubber gloves, and just be able to hold it and get a picture. So if there's any public aquariums out there with coelacanths, you've got to send me an email and invite me down there so I can hold it, because it's on my bucket list of 10 things I have to do before I pass away. Okay? Very important. So I also, besides prehistoric fish, I love uarus. You can see my uarus up there. You can see the panda uarus over here. We have been fighting a hole in the head problem with the uarus, which I've never had before. It's just so odd. And we had some little ones, and we put the little ones in here, and they get along fine. In fact, the little ones come out and kind of like push the big ones around. We have a fly river turtle that came from an accredited American Association, AZA zoo. It was a confiscation that they had a bunch of excess they wanted to get rid of, and we took that one. So we have little baby plecos that we're breeding. Yes, I wish they were zebra plecos, but they're not. They're just a common pleco that probably breeds like flies, as long as you put these little funny little caves in there. Any kind of little pleco cave, and they just breed like crazy. These are Florida box turtles, which we've been breeding for probably 35 years now. We had our original group of Floridas, and we're probably on the 12th generation of Florida box turtles that we have been breeding. In fact, we provide a few zoos with Florida box turtles. We have in the past. Forrestines tortoises, one of the rare tortoises from Southeast Asia. Endotestudo forrestini. And actually we just sent some offspring of those to a zoo recently. These are some of our baby turtles. Here's the little golden threads, which as babies are just beautiful. Almost green in color. Here's baby star tortoises. And what's interesting is a friend of ours breeds these, and he brings us the eggs. And everyone had the same problem when they hatched out star tortoise babies. They would lose them after a month or two. They would just die. It was a mysterious star tortoise death, and nobody knew why. And so I'm not sure who, but someone said, why don't we take the fecal matter from the adults and put it in their food to jumpstart their digestion, because possibly it is something from the gut. And we did that, and we haven't lost any. Zero. None. So now, every time we breed star tortoises, we take poop from the adults, grind it up, put it in their food, and give it to the babies, and we don't lose them. It just goes to show the power of the gut and how they're doing all this new research on it for humans as well, and how they needed something from the parents. You know, I mean, you see dogs eat fecal matter. Probably tortoises do the same thing, and there's probably a reason for it. So when a baby hatches out, if you can't eat the fecal matter from the adults, you can't jumpstart his digestion. They die for no reason. Not bacterial, not parasitic, and doesn't look like viral. They just die. So that stopped it. So I'm super happy. So these are baby pancake tortoises. We breed a lot of pancakes, which are from Tanzania and Kenya. They live in like rocky outcroppings. And here's the smallest baby pancake we've ever hatched. It's like the size of a $50. He's so tiny. And it took him like another 4 weeks before he hatched out from the same clutch. So really a cool little turtle. So this is the dog food wall, dog food advertising wall. And we have a combination of English companies like Spillers, Millox, Savile. Those are all English companies. And you've got US companies, Lowe's, Rival, Lassie, which what are they trying to do? Copy the dog. Wayne's Dog Food, US company. Then you've got again Europe again, Savile. You've got Spratz. You've got Win-A-Lot, which was, again, I said in the last video, that was for racing greyhounds. And then Spillers released it as a general dog food because they did so well with it. Spillers Shapes, Flea, Tick and Lice sign. Again, Old Calabar, that is a English company. Spratz, Spratz really was a worldwide company. They had locations in England, they had locations in Germany, locations in France, locations in Canada, United States. They were everywhere. So, I mean, it's hard to tell whether that was US or that was English. Miller's Dog Food, I love that sign. Cut out like a little Scotty dog. I don't know much about that company though, Miller's. They must have been just a short-lived dog food company, probably absorbed by a bigger dog food company. Again, you've got some Old Calabar, some English companies, and the famous Millox dog food with the wire hair fox terrier standing on the ball. That's like one of the most famous dog food signs. There's a bigger one too. That's a smaller size one, but that's a sign people just love. Okay, this is one of the more famous neon signs that we have as far as tropical fish stores go. This is Aquarium Stock Company, and this was the original New York location sign. They probably had a couple signs, but this was probably the longest lived one that they had. The sign came to us from a collector that found it, and my good friend Joe Ferdenzi and the Greater City Aquarium Society actually made a sizable contribution to procure the sign and to restore it, because all we had was the face. We didn't have the neon, we didn't have the box, we didn't have the sides. And we found, my nephew found old pictures of it, so we saw that the side of the sign had tropical fish written on the side, which is really cool. So you could see the tropical fish that was actually written on the side of the sign. Aquarium Stock Company started in 1912, established 1912. They said 1911 in one of their catalogs, and another catalog said 1912, so we'll just say 1912. They originally started selling medical leeches, and then they got on the goldfish bandwagon and sold goldfish. They liked it so much they got into tropical fish and just became a behemoth tropical fish store known all over the East Coast. I mean, all the aquarists would go to Aquarium Stock Company. In 1944, they opened a location, right at the tail end of the war, in Beverly Hills, on Beverly Boulevard. And there was a huge store with one of the most beautiful neon signs I've ever seen. Still trying to find it. So if you have that neon sign in your garage, you need to contact me immediately. But the one in Beverly Hills I actually sold live reptiles to back when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I sold them reptiles, and it was a beautiful store. Really super nice people. I don't know when they exactly went out of business, but I think it was in the 1990s. And I'm not sure when the New York location went out, but probably around the same time period. But they were an amazing, again, store that was well loved by aquarists. Okay, so this is the California Alligator Farm, which was a big attraction in California from the late 1800s all the way up until about the 1970s. My grandmother took me there in the 60s when I was a little kid, and they had a moat with a little island with probably a couple hundred alligators and a slide. And I don't think the alligators would climb the back of the slide. I think somebody would probably run them up there and they would slide down the slide, and that was one of the big attractions of the park. They also had a tuatara, which is like a living dinosaur. It's one of that and the coelacanth are really the two living dinosaurs that are alive today. And the interesting thing about the tuatara, which is a lizard from New Zealand, and not technically a lizard, but kind of looks like a lizard, but it can live up to 200 years, which is longer than a Galapagos tortoise or a macaw or something like that. So it's really one of the longest lived animals in existence is the tuatara. Now, the interesting thing about the alligator farm was that across the street was a fruit stand, and it was Mary Knott, and she sold boysenberry jam, which they created the boysenberry, I believe, and it got so popular that she started a chicken restaurant, fried chicken, and that became super popular. Then her husband did a little cowboy town, and that became Knott's Berry Farm. So the interesting thing about the second largest amusement park in California next to Disneyland is that Knott's Berry Farm went across the street from the alligator farm because that's where the attraction was. That's where all the excitement was. You know, in Buena Park, that's where you went, was the alligator farm. So she put her jelly stand right across the street. So it's kind of cool. On these neons over here, you've got All Glass Aquarium, which was one of the big solid glass with no frame aquarium manufacturers in the 70s, 80s, 90s, until they were eventually bought out by Central Garden and Pet, and the name was changed to Aqueon. So the Aqueon tanks, originally were called All Glass, was the name of the company. And then of course Wardley's, a company still in business today, bought out by Hart's Mountain, and then Hart's sold to an investment firm out of Japan, I believe. And this is an old sign, says, "If fish could talk, they'd ask for Wardley's fish food." Well, that was a tagline for Tetra. They said if fish could talk, they'd ask for Tetra. So I don't know if they got in trouble for that or not, but I thought that was really funny that they had the same tagline as Tetra. These are oversized building signs. These are big, you know, they're like 4+ feet. Cadet, Vigo, and Dr. Ross. Dr. Ross had a really interesting history. That was a California-based dog food company that started in 1932. They had a pretty checkered past where in the very beginning they tried to not just do horse meat, which was really a common dog food back in those days, but they also tried to do sea lions and whales. And I'm sure they got in trouble for that, you know, using that as a cheap protein source at the time. And eventually they sold to Skippy Dog Food, and I'm sure that they've killed the name a long time ago. But one of the other interesting things about Dr. Ross is we have one of the giant round signs that I thought went outside of the company and rotated, and was the really cool advertising sign that Ross would have used at the factory. But then I found a picture the other day of a car, and it was like an advertising car for Dr. Ross dog food, and the big round Dr. Ross can was the front of the car, the front end. It was really cool. So I will try and see if I can get a picture of that. Massey's Tropical Fish Store, that was out of Seattle. Super nice woman, well liked in the area. We got this sign not too long ago, maybe 1 or 2 years ago. I didn't want to restore it. I don't like to restore everything. It's probably not a good idea. You like to have the original patina. This sign's in pretty bad shape though, missing the neon and all the colors and everything. And we may restore it if we could find a picture of what the original sign looked like. So if any of you took a vacation and you're outside of Massey's Tropical Fish and you've got a photograph or a slide of what the sign looked like originally, please send it to us, because we would really like to see what the colors were and how the neon configured in that sign. It's a cool sign. This sign is from 1990s, and this was a friend of mine, Lynn Penny, had a store in Texas called Sea Dreams, and I love the sign. It just was phenomenal. When she closed her store, I contacted the owner to see if I could buy the sign off the building, and he said sure, and sold it to us. But it's like a polished aluminum. It's a pretty interesting sign with the what look like Moorish idols, which is funny because she's a real freshwater person, Lynn, and she breeds angelfish. I've known her since I was a little kid. She nicknamed me Lungfish Boy because I would go into her store and say, "You have any lungfish?" Belt's Aquarium out of Missouri, St. Louis. Otto Belt was one of the probably most predominant aquarists from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, actually 20s through the 50s. He wrote articles for all the magazines. He was a German immigrant. I believe from what I've read that his father got him into fish, and in Germany they used to have these street fairs where they would actually set up little aquariums with fish that people had bred, some of the hobbyists. Because in Germany back then, they would have aquarium meetings, aquarium society meetings every week. It wasn't once a month, it was weekly. And he would help his father set up on these street fairs and stuff. And when they immigrated to the US, he started his own store, which turned into Belt's Aquarium, and had a big fish farm where he sold fish all over the US, actually exported fish as well. He started around 1926, and I know the Belt was taken over by, I believe, or sold in 1960s, and it closed around the 1990s, right in that area. This sign I got from the salvage yard. I went to Belt's right before they sold it to the city. They sold the actual compound to the city of where Belt's is at. And I bought the sign, and I bought some old breeder flats that were outside, just trashed, from the salvage company. And they had this huge stack there that said Belt's on it. And when I was talking to the city, I said, you know, you're going to save that stack, aren't you? Because you don't realize this is really a historic property. And I know you're going to make it into like just a city yard, but you need to at least have the stack. And they did, actually. They dismantled it, put it in storage, and I'm hoping at some point that I can convince them and raise the money to take it out of storage and put it back on the site of where it was, and put a plaque there to Otto Belt to really honor him. Wilshire Pet Supplies was a very large pet store in business for, a long time, up on Wilshire Boulevard in Los Angeles, very well known. This sign actually was in a sign graveyard, and it was picked up by a friend of mine who has an antique shop up in Hollywood called Off the Wall, and I had him restore it. But the nice thing was the paint was all original, but they restored all the neon to it. Did a really good job. So it's nice when we could save and preserve some of these old neon signs. Another Melux dog food. Amazing how big the dog food signs were that came out of England. You know, they really had large dog food signs. And I love what they say, you know, their feeding qualities impossible to surpass. You know, a little poetic license there. Kitty Queen Pet Foods up in Vernon in Los Angeles. Mike Gordon was the person that we dealt with. This is an interesting company for us because when we started ZooMed, we wanted to can, we used to make foods in like a heated, jacketed mixer. We actually made our own foods, and we ladled them into these little plastic containers and put the lid on. And again, the trick is shelf life, and we didn't get a long shelf life out of them. So I knew that what we needed to do was to retort them. We needed to actually make the food at a commercial operation that had retorting machines, which is, in other words, they could can it, and they could put a nitrogen flush in the can, which takes out the oxygen, put the lid on, put it in a retort machine and cook it, and then you'll get a 2, 3 year, 4 year shelf life out of it. So, none of the companies wanted to talk to us. You get some young kid saying, hey, I've got this reptile company and I want to do canned reptile foods. Click, they hung up. But Mike talked to us, and he actually believed in us and made our reptile food for us. We had like 6 different flavors, I think, and just wonderful. The funny thing was they were right across from Calcan. Like Calcan was next door to them. a huge company, but I'll always be grateful to them because they gave us a chance. Bob Martin's, this was a freeway sign or expressway in England, and we got this and we framed it. And the interesting thing is Bob Martin was like a famous dog breeder who started his own dog company that made both food and made different kinds of vitamins and things like that for dogs. And they existed for ages. I mean, only recently they were bought out by some big company that basically killed the Bob Martin brand because, you know, hey, who's Bob Martin? I mean, he might have been famous 60, 70 years ago, but he's not today. So, and I guess they felt the brand wasn't strong enough. So they killed the brand, but which is sad because that's the end of the Bob Martin's brand. And they were around for a long time, since probably the 1920s in England, and they were really well known. He was a very, very high-end, well-known dog breeder. This is Andy's Pet Shop, which is in San Jose, California. And this sign was, a woman had bought the pet shop, and she had put this sign in the back of her truck, and her truck got in an accident, so the sign was damaged. So she found us and knew that we wanted things like this, so she sold us the sign, and we went through the restoration process of restoring it. And a good friend of mine, Chuck Rambo, who used to go to Andy's years ago when it was down in San Jose, he said, Gary, it's beautiful, but you got the wings aren't flapping. He says the original sign, the wings flapped on the parrot. So yeah, okay, well, you didn't know that, Chuck, sorry. But it is a great sign. I love the fish swimming at the bottom of it. And maybe one day we'll see if we can get the wings to flap. This is interesting because this is probably from the 60s, and this is a pet shop showing frozen horse meat. Believe it or not, when I was a kid in the late 60s working in a pet shop, one of the biggest selling dog foods was a loaf, a frozen loaf that was horse meat that was made by Breeder's Choice. And everyone bought that food because the store I worked for at the time, Russo's Wonderful World of Pets, it was in Newport Beach, Fashion Island. I started there at 11 years old, making 50 cents an hour. So, and I think it was 1968 when I started. But I remember selling how much horse meat we sold. We sold tons of it. And I think it stopped about 10 years after that. They just stopped selling horse meat because it wasn't politically correct for some reason. But the horses that they used initially was after World War I. They used so many horses in the war. When they came back, they thought, these are horses that we can't use anymore. So they used them as horse meat and dog food. But that stopped abruptly in the 70s, I believe. And a lot of people were mad because I guess it was a really popular dog food. I know I sold a ton of it, you know, back when Breeder's Choice, which was owned by dog breeders, that company. And they had this loaf, and that's what it was, horse meat. There's a psychedelic Iams Good for Life dog food sign. I'm not sure of the age. It's got to be either 1990s, I'm thinking. Here's a point of purchase display for Purina. It's Purina Dog Chow. And you've got, up in the tree is a raccoon, and he's holding the dog chow and making the dogs very mad. They're jumping up trying to get it from the raccoon, the mischievous raccoon. And this was a restoration project too, because when we got it in, it's cardboard, but it's motorized. So we had to fix the cardboard because it was badly damaged, fix the motor, and get it working again. So it's a cool sign. So this is the original Zoomed sign from San Luis Obispo. Zoomed started as a live reptile import-export company and then morphed into a manufacturer of exotic pet products, primarily for reptiles, but also aquarium fish and birds. It moved from Orange County here like about 1990, 1991. This was our first sign that we did, and I just wanted to preserve it. It's just a plywood painted sign. We had a local sign painter paint it for us. You know, those days, our salad days, we were scraping for every penny and didn't have a ton of money for a sign. So I think this sign actually did cost us about $1,000. And again, a couple of big dog food signs. Lone Star, I'm sure, Texas Dog Food Company, and Vigo, which has the great German Shepherd with the little Vigo can on his collar. All right, this is the Cameo Pet Shop, which was a large store in New York. I had the chance of going there before they closed with my good friend Joe Ferdenzi, and I met Steve, who was the owner at the time. A really cool store, and he also loved some of the old vintage stuff. He had an old piston pump he was showing us. I got a letter from some of the relatives of this store, and I'd like to really go into that more. So I think I'm going to do a video at a later time to basically talk a little bit about Cameo, because I don't know enough about it. I just know that it was an important store to the people in the area, and it had been there for a long time. It actually, a couple of movies were shot there. I know at least one movie was shot there that Joe sent me some information on. I always was perplexed if I should restore the sign, but I kind of like it this way, you know, sort of like showing the age and the patina and everything. But you know, again, it was sad because things change, and the store is probably worth so much money, the real estate was, that and he probably wanted to retire and had no one to sell it to. So that's how we lose some of these great old stores. And they mostly had tropical fish. They didn't have much in the way of birds when I visited. It's interesting, I got the big sign, and there was a little one around the corner on the other side of the store, and Joe got that and put it in his fish room in his basement. So those of you watching that are in New York and friends with Joe Ferdenzi, you could see the other Cameo sign in his basement when you check out his fish. This is a little display area that we have at ZooMed, and this will be moved over to the museum when we open it up. And the first thing is the polar bear collection. Polar bears, they started in zoos in 1845. Zoo Berlin had the first exhibit of polar bears. And in 1917, the San Diego Zoo had their first exhibit of polar bears, which was a gift from Ellen Browning Scripps, which I'm sure is of Scripps Institution of Oceanography fame. They made them out of different materials. You've got terracotta, you've got porcelain, and you've got chalkware. Chalkware being the low end, porcelain being the high end. Chalkware is plaster of Paris, very easy to manufacture, although it's pretty crude. Where porcelain is a little more complicated, you need a kiln to fire the clay and then you put a glaze on it as well. Some of these, like this one right here, is Johann Maresch. That's one of his. This one was in celebration of baby polar bears bred at a zoo. I can't remember the name of the zoo, but they actually did a little fish tank thing with polar bears on it, and they sold that at the zoo. Here's another Johann Maresch with the polar bear. There's a really rare porcelain one up there, and the bears are looking down into the iceberg, and then you could see the fish. The fishbowl, actually, there's like a window to see the fish, which is what the polar bears see, which is pretty cool. Then you go over, you got more Johann Maresch, which is called terracotta ware, and this came, Maresch was in Czech Republic, is where his factory was. And when he passed away, it went to his son, and his son is the only one that made the fish bowls. I think I've talked about this before, but he only made them between 1900 and 1910. And the company went through the 1940s, about 1943, because it did get bombed. It was in Czechoslovakia. It wasn't in Germany, so it's Czech Republic now. It did get bombed by the Americans because it was German occupied at the time during the war, and they finally closed in 1944, I believe it was. Up above is one of the famous scenoramas where you have, it's really a lamp below, and you could, the fish, when it's plugged in, fish goes swimming around the lamp. And the top part is a fishbowl. Again, we've got some different, this is Johann Maresch, and that's August Otto, which was his #1 designer, was August Otto. And I could tell this is signed by him. This one here probably isn't Johann Maresch, but it's definitely German or Austrian. This one is German or Austrian, also by a different company. Okay, so we get to these. These are Castle, Jacob Castle. And they're faux bois, which means fake wood. And Castle was in Philadelphia. He started about 1890s, and he was selling these probably through about the 1910, 1920, right in there. This is the rare stump one that he did. Again, it's concrete, made to look like wood, called faux bois. And then this is I call it the stick one. And not many people know that there's two different sizes. There's the big size, which is the one you most commonly see. And this is the only example I've seen of the small one. The small one was a birthday gift from my good friend Chuck Rambo. So I was pretty pleased with that. This little faux bois one with the roof, that came out of England. And it was made by an English company. I can't remember their name, but I have the ad for it. Because I couldn't remember, I couldn't figure out where it came from. When I bought it here in the U.S., I was like, I've never seen this tank. And sure enough, I see an ad, and it was from England, from a tank manufacturer that made it. You'd think it was French, or even U.S., kind of like Castle, but it doesn't have enough style, the same style that Castle did, or material. So here we've got another Johann Maresch of a boy with a little fishing net. He's getting ready to fish in the pond. Right above it, you've got a chipmunk cage, which are smaller than squirrel cages. Squirrels and chipmunks were very popular pets, 50 plus years ago. And chipmunks were easier to take care of, and they tamed a little easier. And so the cages were a little bit smaller. Then you've got a footed fishbowl, which footed fishbowls go all the way back to the late 1700s. And the reason they were footed was because people had very expensive linen, that they would set these on, and they want to make sure they didn't leak. So if there was a leak, they want to be able to see it before it ruined their linen. So not only was it decorative, but it was also functional. And a little trick, you want to tell the ones made in Europe from the ones made in the US, the European ones normally have a smaller top opening. I've noticed that all the ones made in the US from US glass companies have a larger top opening, and normally the European ones have a solid glass post, where the American ones have a open fluted post. These were made in Portugal. These are just fishbowl holders, probably made in the 40s and probably imported into the United States, 40s and 50s, right in that era. The gnome up there, the famous garden gnome, that's Johann Maresch, made a lot of gnomes. In fact, the town that they're in the Czech Republic, I think has a giant gnome as sort of it's like a tribute to the company. It was a manufacturing town, and they were huge. They were one of the biggest manufacturers there. So it's a shame. If I ever get a chance to go there, I hope they have a museum, because I love Johann Maresch stuff. Like here's a dog, his faithful dog with his little boy. Again, that's probably an August Auto design. That was his main designer, who did a lot of designs for Johann Maresch. These aren't Maresch's. These are probably German or Austrian. Don't have a bull on that one. This one is a famous manufacturer. I can't pronounce the name, but it's porcelain. It has a glaze on it. I have a couple of these. These are really, really interesting and just beautifully done. This is one of the most terrible fish bowls because, well, number one, it's Vaseline glass, which doesn't matter. But the other thing is you've got this place where you can get anaerobic or dead bacteria that kind of rises up and takes the oxygen out of the bowl, and so you kill your fish. Even with an air stone in there, there's no room for the fish. It's just a bad design. And luckily, it's the only one I've ever found of this example, so I'm glad they didn't survive. Up on top, you've got probably very similar to Chase. Chase was very big, modern, atomic, deco kind of a manufacturer that made these like fish that swim around there. And probably not Chase, but a similar company to them. The jar up there is for trout eggs. Believe it or not, it's a vintage trout egg jar. When they had to like tumble the eggs or whatever they do with those jars, I'm not really sure. This is it's one of our favorite tanks. It's a battery case, but it wasn't made for a battery case, but it was made the same way. Like battery cases used to be glass. They were never plastic because they had acid in them. So the original battery cases were glass. And then they made this copper top and copper feet. There's copper feet on the bottom. The feet are frogs. And the top looks like a little angelfish. And angelfish was first imported around 1910, 1915, right around there. So to me, it was like they were celebrating angelfish and making a really decorative little tank. We have two of these. We have another one that's a different size. And I think these were made by Aquarium Specialty Company right around 1910 to 1915. That's my guess. I've never seen a catalog, and if we ever run across one and could pull the picture out,
that would be really interesting. One of these came up for auction that was sold as like a Tiffany glass piece because they made it into a lamp kind of thing, and it sold for a lot of money. And I think that was an aftermarket kind of thing. I don't, I called the auction house. I said, how do you know that's Tiffany? And they pretty much almost hung up on me. Again, probably poetic license. These pieces were made post World War II in England when they were giving jobs to people to get the economy back on track. So they made these little funny composite, which means it's sort of a combination of resins and other things, paper, whatnot, to make these hollow little fishbowl holders. One time I saw somebody say they were a card holder for counters to put business cards in, but I don't believe that. I think these were always fishbowl holders. And the rare one is the one where the boy's looking up and he's holding the bowl. Most of those bowls are broken. So here you've got Dr. Daniel's. Now the little teeny one is Spillers, but the one he's sitting on top of a Dr. Daniel's dog and cat case, store case, which a pet shop would have had with Dr. Daniel's remedies or whatnot inside of it. That's the rarest store case Dr. Daniel's made. And then that's the cat Dr. Daniel's made to show that he made some cat medicines. And here's Dr. Daniel's. This is a concrete dog he made as store advertising. Daniel's was amazing advertising wise. He had all kinds of veterinary advertising for his products. He actually made one of a dog food that was amazing. It was one of the better dog foods out there for the time period, but it didn't sell. And so I've never seen a box of it or anything, but I do know that it exists, and I knew that some of the dog history articles I've read tout about that it was a really good formula for the time period. Sargent's, those also went on the counter of stores and contained Sargent's dog medicines. You've got the German Shepherd, which was one of Poke Miller's favorite dogs, and then you've got puppies there. And that's a green depression glass with a sea nymph in the waves, we call it. That was made in the early 1920s. The top one that's chrome is that modern chase type fishbowl holder. And then next to it is a Frankart. That's an original Frankart tabletop. They made a floor stand like that also, with the woman sitting on the side of the bowl. This one I'm not sure of the manufacturer, but the bowl is Gillender, and that's the rare 1 gallon size canteen bowl that you just never find, the 1 gallon. And this I just love. This is an optic bowl on a milk glass base that's hand painted. I think this is late 1700s, early 1800s, and that would have been for goldfish. The reason they did this optic thing is because, you didn't look at fish through a side panel like in the wild. In the wild, you look at fish from the top looking down, whether it's a river, a pond, a creek, a stream, whatever it is, you look down on the fish. So they would put goldfish in here and maybe fantails or whatever. It would just give sort of a weird appearance. It would almost like an illusion. And that was popular. I mean, the bowl is not common at all. It's the only example I've seen. But I have seen them do this optic effect all the way up until 1928, and they stopped it then. But some bowls would have this optic effect. I believe this is Cincinnati Fiance Company from the 1920s, and this was a complete aquarium made from pottery and put in a kiln and fired. The company was short-lived. I have an ad from them stating that they made aquariums, and what else could they make but Fiance, which is a pottery type material. And I have a vintage terracotta castle in there. Late 1800s, 1910, right in that era. That is a really rare tank. Again, Vaseline bowl, the rare 1 gallon from Gillender, with a really beautiful stand, which I think is Chicago Art Foundry. These are called Kingfish, and these were made by L.E. Smith. He was really proud of these things, and I don't think they sold. They were made as fish bowls. They weren't made as for table decorations or anything like that. They were made as fish bowls. He had 6 different models. He had the clear, he had the green or the Vaseline, and then he had the ribbed. And then he came out with a later model where he added more space, probably because fish hobbyists said, hey, there's no room for the fish. So he made this bottom thing to it so the fish would have actually more room. And he made those in 3 models as well, the ribbed and the Vaseline and the clear. So that's kind of interesting. L.E. Smith. And my good friend Tom Fite from the Glass Museum in West Virginia, he wrote the book on L.E. Smith. And he's got these pictured in his book. So we've got terracotta, we've got chalkware, and chalkware. Here's another Johann Maresch of a boy fishing outside the wall. It's a smaller piece. They didn't do many smaller ones. And there's a larger one with the boy looking in the bowl. This again is the rare illusion. This is the top part, which you'd see, you know, with the bird cage, where you've got the bird inside and the fish swimming around it. So you saw it in the last video, the illusion bird cage. This is the bowl part of the illusion bird cage. But I bought it like this, to where it had the taxidermy bird inside, and I like the little filigree it has at the top of the bowl. And this is original. You know, the ones that I did have for the cage, I had no bowls, so I had to have them reblown. Took, like I said, a year at a cost of $1,000 a bowl. This particular one I bought from an auction, and it is one of the original ones. So these up here, you could see the black dolphin base with the amber bowl, blue dolphin base with a blue bowl, frosted green with a painted green bowl, green depression glass dolphins, and Vaseline glass dolphins with a Vaseline bowl. All made by Tiffin Glass. Tiffin Glass was the high-end decorative division of U.S. Glass. U.S. Glass was the umbrella company for about 10 different glass companies. And the glass companies were struggling, so they teamed up and got together and put them all under the umbrella of U.S. Glass, but they operated individually. Like Tiffin operated as their own unit, making these very elaborate glass pieces. These are from the 20s. You see the black one comes available every now and then, but the colored glass ones don't, especially the bowls. The bowls seldom come up. This was made in Germany, and that's by Relpa. Nicholas Walper was the man, and Relpa was his company, and that's Vaseline glass is the battery case bowl, which is pretty interesting. They had a really interesting line of aquarium items. So here we've got a little tiny faux bois aquarium, probably French. And inside of it, you've got a sea lion, you've got some fish, you've got a crayfish, you've got some swans, and you've got a seagull. All of those are bisque. They're basically fired pottery. They're hollow inside. They were made for aquariums by some of the doll companies back in Germany in the 1920s, and they float. They're called floaters. Again, Johann Maresch with the dog. This one is chalkware. And I think that Johann Maresch actually did this bulldog with terracotta, and then somebody knocked it off in the US and made it out of chalkware and sold it, you know, probably in the 40s or 50s after Maresch stopped production. And then you can see the beautiful macaw, that's Johann Maresch. This is Continental pottery. They manufactured contract manufacturing for a lot of big department stores. They made a few fishbowl stands, including one with monkeys, which is rare. The ones with cats, they made like several different versions. There's a version up there which is different than the tiger cat version down here. That's a really old chalkware piece, American made, probably 1930s. And then that was, I'm guessing that's from Europe actually. I'm not familiar with that company, but it's kind of cute. The fishbowl is the stomach of the cat. So here, you see the glass elephant, and then there's another glass elephant. This glass elephant was from the Mary Ryan Company, which I believe imported it probably from Poland or Czech Republic or something like that. And it was sold as a fishbowl. Very rare, only one I've ever seen. Pretty cool though, as an elephant fishbowl. This was made as a flower frog, or basically to put on a table with flowers or whatnot. It was never made as a fishbowl. That was an American glass company that made that one. And this one, I had the information, I don't have it offhand, but the little Zeppelins were made by another very obscure American glass manufacturing company. The mermaids with a little lighthouse and the what they call brain globe that's in green depression glass with a green depression glass bowl. That's pewter is the type of metal. And they made a couple different versions of that. I'm not sure the manufacturing company, but that's those come up. A couple of Johann Marech's, one with a dog and one with a horse, looking at the fishbowl. This is really rare. This is the Fenton turtle, and this isn't the original bowl. I thought it was an interesting bowl. I've never seen this one before. And if Tom watches this video, maybe he could tell me who made this bowl. But this Fenton is jadeite, and Fenton made a bowl for it. I looked for 30 years to try to find one, and I finally got the piece with the original bowl. But they're extremely rare because Fenton, which had a long history making all kinds of decorative glass, they only made one fishbowl, and it was a fishbowl connected to a turtle, and this was it. But again, it's not this one because that is a Fenton turtle, but that's not a Fenton bowl. This is a miniature version of the Jewel Aquarium that we showed you earlier. Someone actually made these and sold them in the 80s and 90s. I see them come up for sale every now and then. I always scratch my head. I mean, somebody had a lot of time on their hands and wanted to make a little tribute piece to the big Jewel Aquarium and made this little miniature one, which I'm sure you could keep a betta fish or killifish or antlers live bears or something like that in it, but it's not very big. It's probably maybe 2 gallons. This is magic bird food, and that is a piece that was made out of pottery by an artist out of Carmel, California. And she does that. You could send her any box of anything that you have, and she could make you a porcelain piece, a large one, which is pretty cool. This is a very, very old fishbowl stand tabletop from France. I actually bought that in France. And the bowl is again, the opening is very small. That's how most of the French fish bowls, or the European ones, have small openings. And they put metal around it, which means it's old. I'm guessing first part of the 1800s, between 1800 and 1850 is what I'm guessing. It's amazing that it's in such good shape. It probably sat in the same house through 2 or 3 generations until it finally was sold. This is Italian Fiance, I think they call it. It's a type of pottery that they do, or type of technique that they do. And then above it we have some more Fishbowl aquariums, little small ones that came from France. The top, that's mercury glass. That whole base is mercury. That wasn't done for long because that's not very safe to manufacture. And this is Black Forest. That's in the Black Forest region of Germany. That was famous. The carvers there were very famous for carving cuckoo clocks. Well, they also made a few aquariums, and that's one of them. That's a Black Forest aquarium. Pretty cool. Little boy in the boat, and little turrets like it's a castle and a bridge, and that's wood. That's solid wood. The frame is, and they inset the aquarium in it. It's a metal framed aquarium that's inset into the wood. Very cool piece. Another French piece, probably late 1800s, made of brass. What's cool about this, you could see the sky blue bowl. The bowl was blown into the frame, so it wasn't made separately and then inserted. They actually blew the bowl in the frame, which I thought was really interesting because there's no way to get the bowl out. I mean, you could tell just by the way it sits that they had to have done it inside the frame of the tank. It's an interesting little tank. Above it is another one of the aquarium specialty companies, I believe, from 1910 with the angelfish on top. And you can see the little frogs on this one. The other one has frogs as well. And it's lit up, so it's got to be 1910, probably, I'm guessing 1910, maybe 1915, because it's electrified. That's pewter. It's a boat, and the fishbowl inside is a 1 gallon jar, which I've never seen it before. A pewter ship fishbowl. This again is that Fiance porcelain kind of material with the mythological dolphins, and with a fishbowl inserted in it. It's a pretty cool little piece. This is Frankart. That's the other Frankart tabletop with the 3 women with their arms stretched with the original Frankart Vaseline bowl. And of course, these companies didn't make the bowls. I mean, Frankart made the stand or had the stand made for them, but the bowls were made by a glass company, and probably Phoenix Glass made those bowls for them. That's what I'm guessing. Here's some examples of Art Deco. This was Chicago Art Foundry. This was Chicago Art Foundry with some depression glass bowls. This is Johann Maresch This is an interesting piece. It's pot metal, which has a lot of zinc in it. And whether or not it's a true fishbowl stand, that's yet to be seen, because I've never seen that in a catalog. This is a porcelain piece made, I believe this was made in Europe. I'm not sure exactly where, but we have two of these. We have a green one and then we have this white one. Pretty interesting little pieces, and quite an amazing piece of porcelain to pull from a mold and fire in what would be an enormous kiln. And I think that's gonna do it for this video. Well, I'm not sure if it's going to be one video or two. We'll have to see how long it goes. I want to thank everybody for watching. If you have any questions, be sure to just go to our email and send us a question if you've got one. If you've got any tanks or aquariums you want to donate or sell, let us know. We're always interested. Again, we'll probably have a real museum open to the public around 2027, which is the 50th anniversary of ZooMed Laboratories. All right, till next time.